Hi, welcome to episode 68 of the American Tributaries podcast, where to break out of the bubbles we've all been living in, we're using modern technology to explore the various currents of people in our great country, kind of like a 21st century Lewis and Clark journey. I'm your host, Michael Whitten, here in Brooklyn, New York, and thank you for joining me in this exploration of America. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Jenae Moxie, who lives about 750 miles southwest of me in the Atlanta, Georgia area, and is an associate at the venerable law firm of Wilkie, Farr and Gallagher, which I'd like to give a shout out to because Jenae's colleagues, Elizabeth, Gabe, Leon, and Kim, had provided some fantastic pro bono legal service in setting up the organization American Tributaries as a 501c3. So, Jenae, thanks so much for joining me today. How are you doing? And could you share a bit of your story?
Yes, of course. And love that shout out to them. Special shout out, especially to Gabe for connecting us. And I'm really excited to be here. Honored to have been asked. Thank you for having me. My story. So I'm from Georgia. Let me start by saying that. I'm not originally from Georgia. I was born in Cali. I grew up in South Florida, right outside of Fort Lauderdale, Miami area. Um, Also grew up outside of Philadelphia. Spent some time in New York, spent some time in Boston. But I went to college, like right after high school, moved to Georgia with my family for my dad's job, and have lived here kind of on and off ever since. Moved back here about I don't know what 2018, and it's home. I love Georgia. I like to think that I was born in Georgia. Will die in Georgia, and I just love Georgia. So as I told you, I that's my kind of high level story. Never thought that I would be someone who lives in the South and like considers myself a Southerner, but here we are. My son is was born in Georgia. My husband was born and raised in Georgia. My whole family lives here. I've had family members who used to live in other parts of the country now come and live here as we continue to lure folks to us with our Siren song of the South. And so that's my. I think I heard in one of your other episodes someone say my geographic story
Yeah.
is I'm a Georgian.
um, and what, like, when you say Georgian, is there something that you could say that would describe what a Georgian is
Ooh.
versus, say, an Alabaman or a Floridian or South Carolinian?
Oh, first of all, go dogs is what defines Georgian. Because you're
That's
talking
right. You
about
went to
some,
you went to University of
yes,
Georgia.
you went to
Okay.
University of Georgia, so you're talking about some roll tide, you're talking about some gators, you're talking about some horrifically named gamecocks. No, Georgia, the the defining factor of a Georgian is a love of the Bulldogs, first and foremostly. Um, I think also Georgians are just really friendly. Like I know it's a trope. I know everyone says it, but it's just a whole different warm feeling in the South of people just being friendly. People at Publix, which is like our big grocery store down here. People in the street, like when weird things happen outside and you're just like walking, being like, "Whoa, you saw that?" Just that kind of low level connection that you can instantly create with everyone. That to me is a Georgian. Having lived in Florida, really South Florida though, so it's a very different culture than like any other part of Florida, quite frankly. Actually, just came back from there. I had my family reunion last weekend, or this past weekend, in South Florida, and that's its own like special culture and also feels like home to me. But Georgia is different in that it's just easy. It's an easy place to live for me and for many of the people who live here and stay here. So I think that's what I think for me. That's what makes being a Georgian different.
I guess it seems on the one hand it seems I apologize for putting you in the position of trying to speak on behalf of Georgia, but I think that I feel like what we all need to do in conversations is we have to understand that any statement made is kind of based on your singular experience. So
Yeah.
that's just and every you have a right to be able to say this is what I think a Georgian is, and somebody else might have another perception or they might agree. And I think that's kind of the beauty of things is and there are differences. Like I think when like you lived in New York for a while, and New York has lots of great parts. New York has lots of not so great parts, and I think you almost just have to take I think you want to be pushed by the positivity to fix the negativity, I guess is the way I would look at it.
I 100% agree. New York to me is like the like the complete opposite of Georgia in terms of
Which is why you're down there.
but you know, I go up to so I lived there for 2 years and I go up I'd say every couple months for work, you know, with my Wilkie colleagues. And, you know, I like New York. I think that it is such a like a vibrant place. And like I said, it's such a diverse place, like such a small, like physical area to have so many like distinct cultures and distinct I don't know, feelings when you're in them. Like it's a great place. It's a place where my many members of my family first went when they moved to America because my family are Jamaican immigrants, and so Jamaicans tend to immigrate to South Florida, New York, Canada, and England. But like a lot of them in like the 60s and 70s went to New York, and it's like very imbued in New York culture, like Jamaican culture. So like being able to go up there and get you know, go to a really good Jamaican restaurant or like just be in the streets and hear Jamaican voices is really cool. And like also having the feeling, it's actually, now that I think about it, kind of similar to South Florida in that it's a very like immigrant heavy, not in Manhattan where I was living, but like the area I was, you know, the area I was living. But in terms of like general culture when you go to Harlem or when you go to Brooklyn or Queens, like hearing people that sound like home is a really great feeling in New York. Eh, like I said, South Florida also kind of a similar vibe of just like very immigrant heavy, more so actually because it's like South Florida is almost like part of the Caribbean, quite frankly. But parts of New York can feel like that when you're, you know, you're going to the patty shop or you're going. Oh my gosh, I was just watching Spider-Man into the or no, whatever the second one is, Across the Spider-Verse.
Oh yeah,
Amazing.
yeah.
Love those Spider-Man movies. But like the intro scene is him in a Jamaican man's shop, like warming up a patty, like because it's set in a version of New York, but just seeing him like warming up a Jamaican beef patty in the Jamaican man's store was so much like, oh my gosh, like yes, that is New York. Like I love that part of it. So at the same time, New York is this is a trope, but it's also true. They're not friendly people, so it's not like that same
I'm glad
vibe.
we're having some cross-cultural conversation. I'm gonna have to give
Who
some
me?
nuance to that.
Exactly. Because I'm sure you guys come. Well, listen here, girl. No, but you know, when I was living there, and I think because I wasn't plugged in to any particular community outside of work. Like I had my friends from law school, which of course is a great community, but my community was so small and I wasn't plugged into like a broader community because I didn't have family there anymore. I don't have like intrinsic ties in New York. It was a very like isolating place for me. But for like my friend, who's also Wilkie Kidding, her whole family is from you know, from New York, and you know, she loves it. It is her community. So for people who are from there, I feel like they have a totally different vibe. It's a loving place. It's a warm place. And for me, and I know for other people I've spoken to who aren't from New York, it can be very isolating and hard to have that sense of just like instant connection or instant like warmth that I have in Georgia. So that's a lot of talking.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna stop there.
No, no. This, so and having these conversations, I've learned a lot about New York by learning about other areas. And I think to me, one of the differences in a city of like 8 million, I think this goes to explain why I think some of the sensitivity about like identity, about identity, whether it's by gender or orientation or race or like all this stuff, it becomes more sensitive in New York because it's such a big city that you need to find your niche, you need to find your tribe, right? And if you come here for school, it's kind of easier to kind of like filter in, or you come here for work, you can filter in, but it can still, you put you in your own little silo, right? So if you're a lawyer, now you're just hanging out with other lawyers. If you find whatever, some LGBTQ group or some other things, there are things you find your tribe, but you put your blinders on and that becomes like your existence. um And I think that it's almost hard to kind of just immerse yourself in it. But I think the beauty of it in New York is that if you do force yourself to go out, you can kind of explore, but you can't explore until you have the comfort of some kind of community. You need some people that you feel comfortable with that you can go out and explore the city with, because otherwise it is completely overwhelming. So,
Yes.
and I think that on top of that, like this is just my very generalized feeling. Like when I went to, I was in Greenville with my family, and I kind of felt like I could feel the politeness, um, and like kind of the more the and that was it was kind of easier to kind of get like how you're supposed to be acting. Whereas I think in New York, because there's so many different groups of people, not just even if you just take a snapshot of the city, but also over years, like different immigrant groups are here and different people move on. So it's in such flux that you never really know what tribe somebody's from. So you end up maybe withdrawing a little bit because you don't want to put yourself out there because you don't know how they're going to react to something. So you don't make conversation with the person sitting next to you in the subway car because you have no idea where they're from. They could be trouble. They may not be trouble. Whereas, and maybe it's a little different, I don't know, but I think that to me, at least how I understand why New Yorkers might come across in a certain way and why they may perceive certain like social issues a little bit more sensitively than others, where it's just not as important for having social roots.
I think, yeah, 100% agreed, essentially. Especially on, what was I going to say in terms of, oh, you mentioned like, it's almost like New York, you're always on a little bit of shifting sand because, like you said, there's so many groups coming in, and over the year, like, New York of the 70s looks completely different from the New York of the 80s, looks different. So those sands are always shifting, and the people there who are not from there are all, yeah, that sense of like what's appropriate, what's not, depending on where you are. But now this area, Brooklyn's completely different from this area, and different areas are changing in different ways at different times. So it's like all these weird like turntables all the time, that kind of for me makes you feel a little bit like out of sorts. Even coming, leaving New York in 2018 and coming back for the first time, like to the same job, kind of same general area of New York, post, height of the pandemic, was a very disorienting feeling because, even stores have changed up and people who you kind of had a low connection with are gone, or all the folks in your coffee shop are gone, whatever the case may be. That is just far more changeable. So I know that there's some element of New York that is always the same, right? But I guess I haven't really thought enough to think like, what is it that is the underlying New Yorkness? Like, I don't know what makes a New Yorker, other than like working hard and working all the time. I think like that's one thing. So
Yeah,
that's one of the things that stopped me, at least, from really exploring and doing stuff. Because I feel like I'm a lawyer. My husband was a personal trainer when we were in New York. Both of us worked, I feel like, around the clock. Like we never worked so hard in our lives, and everybody I know, kind of regardless of their job, felt like they were working all the time. So I feel like maybe that's one underlying commonality of New Yorkers is this kind of grind mindset, or like I'm always like the hustle mentality, which again I know it's like a trope or whatever, but it feels true because it felt like to me, no matter what folks I encountered were doing, they were working like sun up to sundown all the time. And so it kind of limit. And I know a lot of New Yorkers complain about not really exploring the city. Like they only do stuff like that when their family comes or like tourists come, and then they explore with them. Because I feel like, for me at least, it was hard to break out of what you just, the bubble, break out of, oh, okay, my lawyer friends can meet for brunch Saturday exactly from 10 to 11:30, and that's when I leave my house and work. Other than that, I'm going back home.
and then they
Um,
cancel anyway.
that part. I think I went to brunch like 5 times when I was there because someone's always canceling. Um, so yeah, that grind. I remember on like Twitter a few years ago, people were talking about grind set. I'm like, oh, that just sounds so hard all the time. But New Yorkers work hard, and I feel like take pride in working hard, which is like, also a beautiful thing. You got to work hard to live in New York because it's expensive. So, there are people are working hard, doing their best by their family, or if they don't have family, but for themselves. And I don't know, like maybe that's the commonality, but it does to me lead to not being able to explore and make connections because you're working so hard and you're tired and you're focused on like what's right in front of you.
Yeah.
But you made me think about like what connections did I make in New York? I haven't really thought about like those type of interactions that I had that that did make me feel because I liked living in New York. The park. Maybe it was in the parks where I felt more where people kind of were more at ease and you felt more that like you're running by someone and you kind of smile and they smile back. I'm like, oh, okay, people do smile. That's nice. I'm like, okay. So that's where it was.
So you when did you think of yourself as like a Georgian? Was it when you started going to University of Georgia, or was that it?
I thought of myself as a Georgian when I was still living in Pennsylvania and I visited, did a senior year student visit at University of Georgia. I was like, well, go dogs, died in the wool Georgian out of nowhere. That's when I thought of myself as a Georgian because it was such a, and I had never, I thought I was going to go to some small liberal arts school in, upstate New York or something. Like, I remember it was Colgate or something. I don't
Yeah,
know where
yeah,
Colgate
yeah,
is, but like I
yeah.
imagined myself going somewhere like that where the leaves change and you sit outside in the quad and do your thing. And I went down there and it's literally like outside the Bulldog Stadium. And I'm standing there, and the tour guide is all like yippee ki yay, like real excited. I don't know if you can say that anymore. Actually, sorry if that is not a
You
thing
can
that
say
I'm supposed
if
to
as long as
say.
you don't finish up with the last word.
I don't know what the last ones are. So,
Oh
oof, you know what?
no, the Bruce Willis Die Hard.
Oh, that's what that's from. Okay.
That's yeah, Yippee Ki and then it would be MF, and that would be the part where
Oh, okay.
a little bit
You
more
see, I don't even know where it came from. I
Yippee
used to
Ki
say
is
anything
cool.
sometimes. Yeah. But yeah, so I go down there and I'm like this is it. Like I love this. You said 30,000 students. I'm here. Like this is great. And it was just so fun. And the people, like, it was this culture that I had never experienced before. Like, I'm on the bus with all these people. Like, I didn't get the memo. I'm supposed to be wearing my, like, red and black. Everyone on this bus is, like, just so excited because it's, like, parents here with their kids. And a lot of times in Georgia, you meet people who didn't go to University of Georgia. Like, but they, everybody has their Bulldogs gear. Everyone whose kid has gotten in or they're just, like, amped for them to go to University of Georgia. And it's just, like, such a cultural commonality amongst Georgians to be like, yes, I love UGA. That it was like an instant, I don't know, I just felt so plugged in and so excited to be there. Um, so yeah, basically from that moment. And then like I had family who was living down here and we had gone to funny enough, we had traveled down that summer. We went to there and we had like a picnic at Stone Mountain. And for folks who don't know, Stone Mountain is a giant mountain park, and it has like a giant carving of Confederate heroes.
There's a Martin Luther
Heroes.
King Jr. cites that in his "I Have a Dream" speech, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like people, yeah, exactly. And so I feel like a lot of people outside of Georgia don't know what that mountain is, and it's literally it's bigger than Mount Rushmore in terms of like the images on there. It's like General Lee, what's his name? Oh my gosh, not me, a history major. I can't remember. Oh my gosh, whatever. Not Stonewall Jackson. Of course, he wouldn't be up there. Um, who was the president of the whatever the president of the Confederacy?
Jefferson Davis,
Jefferson Davis. I'm like, not Stonewall
another history
Jackson.
major.
Yeah, okay. The one who actually can remember things. And then one other guy who I don't even know who the other guy is up there, but it's like this giant carving that took years and years, and it's just like a tribute to the Confederacy. And we're just there having our little picnic underneath the Confederate carving. It's like park full of black people, like all employees are black people. I worked there after my first year of college because it's almost like, okay, well, it's a nice park, so I'm gonna be here anyway. I don't care. Like, I just don't care. It means nothing to me. Like, if y'all want to have your rally here or whatever is going on, it don't mean a thing to me because my black ass is gonna be sitting here at this nice park and having a good time. So, and I'm like, I remember going there, and it was just so fun. Like, I literally, even knowing the full impact of that thing, it's like it's almost like an allegory for living in Georgia, where it's like things that are so outrageously like Confederate or outrageously anti-black or outrageously like just not okay like in like real life are just kind of like whatever. Like, what am I supposed to do? Like, am I supposed to cry about that every day? No. Like, I'm certainly not gonna not go to this park because it's nice. So here we are. Like, here we all are, and I don't care. So it's very much it's not like so much, um, I don't know. I think it's just like living in spite of, like, this is a nice place to live. And I don't care if there's Confederate flags all over this park. Like, is that's what I'm not scared. Like, I don't like I don't even wish there weren't. I just don't care. If that's your thing, that's sad to me. But like, it's not gonna stop me from coming to this park. It's not gonna stop me from living in this beautiful tree-filled city. So, oh well. um, and I think that's something that a lot of people don't understand about folks who live in Georgia. It's a deep South. People, it used to be a punishment to like get shipped down here, but it's, you know, people now, we had the Great Migration in the middle of the, well, not middle, early 20th century, where, millions of Black people from the South moved up north. And I just read this article that aligned with my own personal experience of a lot of Black people are moving back down from the north to the South. And if it was such a horrible place to live still, it's like, then why are we all moving here? Because it's not, it's great. So I don't know, maybe one day I'll explore that more. But all I have for now is my personal experience, and it's great.
Yeah.
So
Well, like I think in New York, like you get the perspective that I have of like the of Georgia is like it's just kind of like full of racial tension and just Confederate, like just like stuck in like some kind of like just full of racism, I guess is what you get the perception of. And gerrymandering and like all this stuff and conflict and it's backwards or whatever. And even then there's Atlanta, and I don't know what to think of Atlanta, but like you don't really get like what you just said now is something that I don't think I've ever really heard from anybody. Not to say that it didn't exist, but you don't get that perspective. And I don't know if it's like, I wonder something of like, if we're all, I guess, two parts. One, I think, are we stuck looking at perceiving other parts of the country and other people in ways that are like way outdated? In other words, and I think we talked about this on the phone, but like, do people in New York look at the South and have a fixed image of like 1940s, 1950s Deep South, and then and vice versa? Do people outside of New York City only have a perspective of New York City in like its worst state, like in the early 70s, where there were abandoned cars everywhere and fires, in buildings? And maybe we just need to kind of, I don't know, either assume we don't know anything, or I guess extend a little bit of grace and patience in trying to understand other areas on for what they are and not what we is sensationalized in the news media.
that's it. Like, I think one important thing, having lived in different parts of the country, exclusively on the East Coast. I can't tell you nothing about Cali, but having lived up and down the East Coast, I think that that's it. Like, extending grace to lived experiences that you haven't lived, right? So even me, having lived in New York, I'm still not a New Yorker, right? So I'm not living the experience of a New Yorker or someone who like considers New York home, because there's lots of people who aren't from New York and move there and don't do the whole like 2 year cycle and leave. Like, they move there and that's their home because they find their people, they find their community, and it's their home. And same with the South, where yeah, I do think that. So let me back up and say there is this concept of there's Atlanta and then there's the rest of Georgia. But even in that, there are different people living all over Georgia. Now, are there still sundown towns that you're not gonna find me in them? Like, yes, I'm not driving without a full tank of gas through certain parts of Georgia. Like, I'm just not going to the country because I, I'm not jogging in the dark. I'm not doing nothing in certain parts of Georgia. So I don't want to like make it seem like, oh, stop, everything's fine, because no, you're not going to catch me in. I can't even tell you what those parts are. I just know I'm not going to them. Even Athens, like Athens is about an hour and a half away from Atlanta. Completely different culture from Atlanta, much more like Southern. Atlanta is like it's a southern city, but it's also a city of like a lot of people from other places, like me. And so a lot of people from Atlanta don't even sound like they're from the South, right? Because there are so many transplants in Atlanta. Um, at the same time, like my family lived in Grayson, Georgia for a while, which is far out, not far, but like, it's in the sticks and it's kind of country. And Stone Mountain is another area that was known as being kind of a hub for like the KKK and just being the kind of place you don't go. On the drive to Athens from my home in Grayson, there's this place you can pull over and it's the site of a horrific lynching and like that in the 50s, right? So we're not so removed that I want to be like, everything's fine and dandy because that stuff just happened like in my parents' lifetime. At the same time, change is rapid. You can see that even, Supreme Court decisions last week, Supreme Court decisions over the past 10 years, change is rapid. So, and it's the same in a positive direction because the other thing is that, and I'll speak on like for me and for like Black folks' experience in the South and around the country, I feel like Black folks are really good at growing where we're planted and growing and thriving in areas where people think we're not supposed to be. And so I think after like generations and years have given at least me and I know a lot of Black folks this sense of like, what are you gonna do, kill me? Like, well, I want to live here, so I don't care. And you know what, I was run out of, like, my family was kind of run out of here before, we didn't feel safe before, but now I do. So I don't care. I think it's this sense of I'm not afraid anymore. And not to say that our ancestors didn't have every right to be afraid and every right to do what they needed to do to protect their families, because that was a different time. But now I feel like for all the folks kind of moving back to the South, it's definitely this attitude of I'm not going to be impacted and I'm not going to let my kids be impacted. So even if there's Confederate flags, I'm like going to take the power away from that. And if you have them, it's not, I don't feel strongly that you need to take them down. I just don't care. And you're not going to, like, there's some folks who like just have them because it really is their culture. And I think that culture sucks, but that's me. And if that's your culture, that's fine. I also think there's some people who do that for intimidation. Like I know there are, and who want you to feel unwelcome and who want you to feel scared. But I'm not scared. So what now? Like I'm just not. I'm also not stupid. I'm not gonna be driving in your neighborhood in the dead of night, but I'm not scared. And I think the other part is I think we've discovered that the North this um, is not the what's the word, elixir. Like living up north did not help us escape what we like. It helped us escape the violence, I think, but there's still police violence. There's violence everywhere, and there's this uh, almost more isolation for me. Like I said, I went to school in Pennsylvania, um, up north, and I also spent time in Boston. You know what? Let me not speak on Boston because I'm sure someone else on the podcast has many things, great things to say about Boston. For me personally, Boston is the worst, most racist place I have ever lived. Like the northernmost place I have ever lived is the single. If you ask, I bet you ask 10 Black people, nine, possibly 10, if they have been to Boston, will tell you it's the most racist place they have ever been. But it is just something is in the air, in the water. I once heard, oh my gosh, this is terrible. But I saw someone on Twitter once say that like people in Boston say the N word with the hard ER and they can't even say R's. So like they really got to put some effort into that. It's wild. Like the amount of times, more than I have ever heard it in my life, did I hear it in Boston. So let me tell you, like the North is not the answer. If you're looking for an answer to like what is ailing you in terms of like racism, oh my gosh, I can't say enough bad things about that place. But it's very beautiful and cobblestone streets, wonderful. Their art museum, top of the line. Lots of Monets in their museum. But I think that being said, like there, Pennsylvania, I would rather face racism with a bunch of other black people than face it in like this kind of isolation that I felt in Pennsylvania, outside of Philly, like Pennsylvania and Boston. There's just, I think in the South also, black people and white people have been living together, for a lot longer. And so there's a lot more like cultural crossover and a lot more like commonalities. Like white people down here have family reunions. They like, black and white people down here go to kind of similar churches, even though they're like very, we're going to black church, we're going to white church.
Yeah,
So there's kind of this
religious.
similar, yeah, they're very religious, frankly, a lot, not obviously not everybody, but like this commonality of like church culture that we can also, because church culture is like its own thing. And so like, I'll be on Instagram and watching these hilarious videos of like white church, whatever acts. I'm like, like this is just so funny to me because it's the same. Like it's the same through line that's going on here because of this kind of common culture that I think is just not the case up north. There's just a lot less commonality. Like even in the foods we eat down here, like you go to a cookout with some Southerners, white and black, it's gonna be the same food. Like real Southerners, it's gonna be the same food. So there's just, to me, it's a lot easier actually to like connect with like a deep South white Southerner than it is for me to connect with maybe a white person from Boston, in my experience at least. So that's, I don't even know where I got this thread from, but like, there we are.
No, well, it's interesting you say that because one of the things that I've been trying to think about is I think that I wonder how much of it is strictly a race issue and how much of it is something else. Because I have a friends, they're a white couple. I've known them since college, so 30 plus years, and they've lived like in Puerto Rico. They've lived outside of Los Angeles. They've lived, in where else? They lived in they live up in Massachusetts now, and they live someplace else. But they said that they feel the least welcome in Massachusetts, and they're there. What they had said is it kind of feels like a lot of people are very kind of rooted in like tradition, so that like if you're not part of what they do, then they can't really relate to you. So I wonder if because I think like in the city, one of the things that I think is something we need to be more sensitive about is I think that in one respect it's good that you can go to a law firm where there's more diversity than there was a generation or two ago. But on the other hand, and with all respect to like your school, if it's just a bunch of people that went to like Harvard and NYU and Columbia, whatever, like how diverse is it? Like are you the same way with a black person from Harvard as you are with the person who delivers your food or whatever? Like there's got to be more. There's got to be other ways of slicing and dicing how you are open and kind to people. And I
Yes,
think there's been headway in certain respects, right? We're much better off than we were, but there's so much more that still has to be done.
yes, yes.
And
Yeah,
maybe that's what you're sensing is that maybe in some ways it's easy for Northerners to take a certain position on race, but there's a lot more that has to be. You can say that as a matter of right, this should be the right way, but there's a difference between the words and the living it.
that's it. It's very up north in New York specifically, because I remember New York, I feel like people can say things and just assume that everyone around them is kind of the same political orientation in the city. Um, and it's like easier because you're all kind of living this. If you have that baseline assumption, you don't really have to have conversations or learn to live with folks who are so like kind of radically different from you, and literally just live. Like it has to be like a statement or something. Where it's down here, like I worked at a law firm down here for a while, and last election, people talking about like, yeah, and you know, it pains me, but I'm gonna have to vote for Trump, and I'm doing this, and I went to the, and to me, it wasn't even like a, it was just like, well, yes, like, what else did I expect? And I'm not gonna, I don't really want to talk about that anymore. Like, I'm not gonna. I'm not going to like you have your reasons, and it's because it was like whether you're this person in particular was like Mormon and had specific viewpoints that I needed, like whatever it aligned, or this person is fiscally whatever. For me, I think living in the South has made me much more not so much like I'm not even trying to act like I'm so accepting and everybody do your own thing. For me, it's more like it. I feel like I have this like coding on me now where I'm like, it just doesn't matter to me. Like it matters in that like the rights matter and the I have like core beliefs that like these things don't align, but like I got core beliefs in my mother that don't align. So what like
Yes,
like
exactly.
what,
Yeah.
I'm gonna stop talking to her? No. And I think that was a big thing. Like my mother Jamaicans tend to be like more conservative or like many Jamaicans, not or like more religious, or like people who are religious tend to have these kind of thoughts, or like so it's like I'm familiar with people talking a certain way. Recently folks have started, people have been real disappointed in like Dave Chappelle for like his thoughts on certain things. And I'm like, have you ever been around a middle-aged black man ever in your life? Like, this is what they think. Like, this is just how they are. And so you have like a lot of like, oh, how could he? And I'm like, you clearly just don't have no uncles who are black. Like this, like, so I think that's the other part of it is that certain people are just you're not familiar with a wide enough array of people, even though you live in New York. Not you, I'm not speaking you, but like whether it's like any, really, I'm talking about the North in general. You don't have enough interaction with people who have wild thoughts, like on a day to day basis, for it to be kind of like, what are you gonna do? And the answer is actually nothing. Like the answer, you're not gonna argue someone into thinking like you. You're not gonna like, and believe me, I've tried. Do you know how many conversations I've had back when I was younger and I had more energy? I don't got energy for all that now. Like I got a 4-year-old child. I'm working around the clock. I don't have energy to be arguing with anybody about their thoughts. What I have energy for is to, go out and engage in the things I believe in. I got a problem with gerrymandering, so I'm gonna make sure my whole family votes. I'm gonna make sure to put my money where it needs to go to address that. Beyond that, I'm not arguing with nobody on the street. I'm not arguing with anybody in my household or in, someone who's one of the conservative Jamaicans. I'm not arguing with a conservative white person. I'm not arguing with the conservative Latinos. That's the other thing. Like everyone's like, oh, why are all these Latinos voting this way? I'm like, you just must not be familiar with. Like I grew up in South Florida, in outside Miami, lots of Cubans. Cubans are Republican. Like, you know, the ones in Miami and certain ones. But I feel like this is like a known political fact. Um, you just don't know enough about them. You don't understand what is motivating these people who are voting this way, because you don't know them and you don't know their lived experiences. You don't know how religion is factoring into that. You don't know how their conservative upbringing is factoring into that. You don't know how, like, so it's like I see a lot of stuff where people are like confused by how folks are voting, or like confused that black men are showing up for Republicans. Again, you just don't have those people in your life. You're not hearing what they're saying. You're not hearing what is important to them. And so if you don't even hear that because you don't have them in your life, then you're gonna be surprised every time, and you're not even gonna have the opportunity to like interact with them, and like maybe we just keep talking and we think a different way, or maybe you keep thinking your way, and now I just understand why you're voting this way, and I'm not shocked and appalled because I thought all black people did this, or I thought all Latinos did that. Like I just feel like when you don't know, or you aren't familiar enough with a broad enough cross section of people to understand like what's motivating them, things are gonna be surprising, and you're gonna have this like, oh, how could they, like almost tisk tisk attitude toward them that is not helpful to like what you're trying to do, or kind of like to any sort of discourse, I think. Like I said, I still think like I've had many a conversation, whether it be with an uncle or whoever, being like, how could you? Like, what is wrong with you? And it's not effective for me. It's not, it don't make no sense. And it's a waste, literal waste of my energy. So I'd rather spend that energy just chilling with my family. If I've already said my piece and it's not going to change,
Right.
I have now like adapted myself, I feel like, to dealing with that like dynamic in a lot of different situations. And it just doesn't bother me. I'm just going to do what I need to do in my life and with my money and with my support to do what I need to do and hope and pray, thoughts and prayers to those who maybe aren't. And that's just it for me.
Yeah, no, the idea of be like living your values more than just saying your values, or like kind of there's a certain, I think, I don't. I'm not going to say it's just limited to New York, but I feel like there's, at least I can see people slipping into this in New York. There's a certain arrogance about being able to fix things or change things. If you think about all the people that come to New York, a lot of them, they either believe they can change the world or they have succeeded in doing some pretty crazy things, right? So there's a certain arrogance about, like, I see things the right way, and you've got to see things this way. So there's a lack of like humility, and there's a lack of like patience. And to me, I think that I've been doing sales of wine since 2010, and it's about more, to me at least, it's about pleasant persistence, like
Yes.
patient, pleasant persistence. So keep advocating what you believe in, but do it in a way that shows that you're actually going to live up to the values you're advocating for. And to me, the best example is like, if you have a kid, to curse at your child not to curse is kind of a little bit inconsistent messaging. So if you really want people to be like loving and caring and open minded, you have to be that way as much as possible. Doesn't mean you have to be best friends, but you've got to kind of walk the walk more than talk the talk.
Yeah, yes, that's it. And I said it as someone who had to train my child out of cursing just the other day because he was just dropping F bombs everywhere. Because, like, well, you, daddy said, like, yes, you as we say, not as we did. But it's, it, it's true. And as someone who used to be much more, I'd call myself, and maybe it's just, I'm starting to think like, is it an age thing where like I used to be one way and I used to be like, my family used to be like, see me coming and be like, oh, here she comes, like freaking Joan of Arc over here. And I was, and you know what? Power to the people who do that and who continue to kind of fight in that way for what they believe in. I think that's beautiful. I think it's powerful. It's just not for me. And especially living in the South, if I did that all the time, I would just be so tired. And I really am in the stage of my life now where I'm just trying to live, and I'm trying to live well and like craft a good life for my kid. And for me, crafting a good life for my kid, like I said, for me, growing up in Pennsylvania, my parents are trying to craft a good life for me, thinking that it would be better, outside the South, outside Jamaica, and to many extents, it was. And also, like, I don't necessarily want my kid to be the only black kid in the class. And so I need to move where there's more black people. Part of moving where there's more black people is living in the South with lots of people who have what are, to me, crazy views about all kinds of things. And another part of that, like, if I made the choice to live down here, then it's like Adele said, I created the storm. It's only right I gotta live in its rain. So like if I am in the South, then I'm not gonna change the culture of the South. Like what? I need to just be in, like, choose my neighborhood carefully. I live in a very black neighborhood, and that's just a very diverse neighborhood. It's like different like income levels and different types of people live in this neighborhood, because a big part of the neighborhood has like an affordable housing. There's like pockets of affordable housing, what's the word, like areas in my particular subdivision. So like I like living in this particular area, because of how diverse it is. I sent my kid to a school that has a lot of different types of kids. Like I was very careful in the school I was picking for him. Um, so to me, it's almost like I gotta learn to just live. I don't want to be in a state like my nervous system can't take it. I can't take being in a state of like agitation all the time. Like I don't want to live like that. I don't want my kid to live like that. And so I live in a place now where I just feel more at ease. And the last time I actually had a situation where I had to like we used to live in New York. We lived in a place where the what's it called? The Macy's Day Parade started. Like they had the floats on the street
Okay. Oh yeah, for
outside
West
our
Side.
door. Yeah, yeah. So it's like right by the Natural History Museum. Oh, me and my money I paid. But anyway, so we lived right there, and like so they block off the street like the nights before. So I guess you got to be on some list or something. I don't know. Either you got to show that you live there, or you got to be on some list. And so I get my husband calls me one day. He's like, they're not letting me into the apartment. Like they're not letting me onto the street with our apartment. I said, why? He said, they don't think I live here. I said, well, did you tell them that you do? That you can just point to it right there? They're like, yeah, they don't think because no black people lived where like on that street. And so I come home. I just left work. I left Wilkie Farm Gallagher and walked on downstairs. Like took the subway up to my house, got out, and just started hollering at that police officer who was not letting my husband go because he knows because I'm a chill person, except things like that. Like, don't, ooh, no, don't mess with my family. Don't mess with my man. Don't, like, my husband's the type who, like, at the restaurant, his food is wrong. He'll be like, no, it's fine. I'm like, excuse me, my husband's food is wrong. So he knew, and he probably regretted telling me, like, calling me specifically. But I said, excuse me, like, do those people who you just let through, did they show any proof of residence or like are they on some list? Because it's like, the whole white family just walking up through there. It's like, no, but we just need. I said, oh, let's stay here together then. And how about nobody comes in here until they show proof of residence? Nobody. And so now there's children crying. Like they can't come on the street with the floats. I'm like, I don't care. Like, if you want to stop my brown husband from coming to his house, then we're going to stop every single person who comes through here and make sure that they are entitled to be here, just like you decided to stop my husband and make sure that he's entitled to be here. Like, because now everybody's got a problem. And so I don't want to be like that. I don't want children crying. I don't want to be antagonistic. Like, it's very exhausting for me. I feel like I was like, I don't know if you ever seen the show Avatar. I feel like I was in an Avatar state. Like, afterward, I'm like, oh, I'm just weak. I'm tired. I don't want to live like that. And whether it's that in New York or like I could be here all day talking about Boston, so I won't. But like I just want to
Part
live in a
two.
place. Yeah,
Tune in next time.
I know. I just want to be in a place where I can live and where I can be. There's this concept. I can be inconspicuously black, and that's a big thing for me. I want to be in a place where my child is not the only black kid around. I just want to be black and not have to be like, ooh, what? Oh my gosh, what's that black person doing here? Like in Atlanta, in Georgia at large, you can just be. You just be. You don't have to feel black all the time. You just are. And that's like why I think a lot of people are coming back down from the north because like I don't want to feel it anymore. Like as someone who loves being black, loves my culture, loves all that, I don't want to feel it all the time. It's like wearing a wool coat in the summer sometimes where it's like I always gotta feel it. Down here, I can just like breathe and live and just be. Like not even be black, just be. And that's what I want for my kid. That's the difference to me between living in like I know we started out like what makes a Georgia like for me what makes Georgia Georgia is that like I can just live in Georgia. I can just breathe in Georgia. I can just be. And my family can just be in Georgia. And that's like the huge benefit to me of living down here and why I love it so much because on top of everybody just being kind of pleasant, nobody bothers me. Like I can just be. And that's what I want. That became like of higher urgency when I had my kid. And that's what I'm getting living down here.
You brought this full circle like a extremely capable litigator presenting a case before a jury. Bravo. There's so much more to talk about, but I know you've got another call you've got to jump on.
Yeah, I'll
Um,
be a few minutes late. It's fine.
uh, but I guess can I wrap up by asking like what gives you hope? And you may have already answered that for this entire podcast, but what
Yeah.
gives you hope at the end of the day?
What gives me hope is the number of folks moving to the South. And what gives me hope is people realizing that you can have a joyful life in a lot of different places in this country, whether it's Texas, like I heard the person on your other episode talking about Georgia. I'm sure Alabama, but the jury's out. You know what?
We can be open, but only so much.
Yeah, exactly. Like, let's not go too far. But no, I really, what gives me hope is just people opening their hearts and minds to coming on down to the South. And in those people coming down, it only makes the South better. Because I think the South, post desegregation is great, and only getting better with each person who like opens their minds and hearts to come down here and make the new South the best place to live in the country to me. So that's what gives me, and my kid gets to grow up here in this new version of the South. And that really gives me hope because I feel like he's already having a great life. And I genuinely see, like, I look out on the future for my kid living down here and I don't want to leave. And that's what gives me hope. Like, I'm happy to be here. My whole family's here. My sister's living in my house. We're great. That's what gives me hope.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for that. And thanks so much for making time to have this conversation, Jenae. It's been absolutely wonderful.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks for letting me ramble. I appreciate you.
Thank you. And thank you all to all the listeners and viewers out there. May you go out and explore our country with curiosity, respect, compassion, and humility. All right, take care, Jenae. Thank you.